Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners, my brothers and sisters. I hope that you are all well. I hope that you are enjoying your weekend so far. I am back today with a set of reflections on something that I experienced a few days ago, which is verbal violence that you get from other Muslims, both Muslim men and women, in online spaces. So these are spaces like YouTube or Facebook or other social media where there are lots of conversations about Islam. And often we see a huge amount of violence exacted between Muslims. So it'll be Muslim people who are commenting on other Muslims. And this can be a very toxic and very judgmental space. And I had a few interactions, not interactions, I chose not to respond, but I had a few experiences last week which sat quite heavily on my chest actually. And I'd been reflecting on that a lot. But then that also got me thinking about how I overcome this heaviness, how I bounce back, how I find my resilience. And so I ended up writing my top 5 tips and strategies for dealing with violence in these online spaces, verbal violence in these online spaces. So this is what I'm going to share with you today. And I'm really hopeful that you will find it to bring you some comfort and to also make you feel quite empowered once you adopt those strategies to deal with what can be some really troubling interactions, which can sometimes sit with us, make us very sad, make us very anxious, make us terrified, make us feel grief-stricken for a long period of time. And we know that on social media, because of the kind of toxic storms that can be unleashed and where people can be targeted, especially Muslim women who are targeted for their appearance. And I'm always targeted for my appearance because I don't wear the hijab. Some of these experiences can be really traumatic, and I'm aware of many situations and cases where women have had massive deterioration in their mental health, and then it's taken them very, very many months to overcome the issues. Now, these strategies may or may not work for everyone. They certainly work for me, and this is what I often turn to. And I think this is the first time that actually I've consciously written these tips down. I realized that I was doing that, but I hadn't really quite written them down. So it's almost become a toolkit for me to share with you. And I hope that you will find it helpful. So without further ado, this is a discussion on 5 top tips that you can adopt to deal with online violence, verbal violence in online Muslim spaces, violence from other Muslims. So let me start with giving you a little bit of background. So I have been busy, as you know, Eram Saeed and I are recording a series of podcasts where we are pulling together a lot of learning, a lot of reflection on issues that are troubling Muslim women across the world, both in Muslim majority countries, but also in the diaspora, and perhaps particularly in the diaspora in the West, where you now have a significant Muslim populations living in countries like the UK, the US, and lots of complex issues are coming up. So we're having discussions, and we've already released the topics in advance. Now, this is requiring quite a bit of work. And the last one that was released, they're mostly in English and Urdu, so we're using both English and Urdu. And the last podcast was released, I believe, on Tuesday, the 25th. And it's only been released on Eram's channel. I will, inshallah, release a copy of that on my channel soon. I just didn't get the time this week to upload it, but inshallah, I will. So my audience who speak Urdu can also benefit from that. And then I'm going to release an English version of the podcast for my audience, because a lot of people in my audience are Muslim converts or Muslims who live in the West, and it's easy for them to relate to things in English language. So inshallah, I will be recording that in English and sharing that with you as well. But anyway, the podcast was about understanding and overcoming religious OCD. And as always, there were lots of comments which were very positive. And to be honest, most of the comments were very positive. But then there was this one comment which somehow was ageist and sexist and misogynist all in one go and completely ill-informed. And clearly the person who had commented had not really seen the video, so they had no idea what they were saying. But they had very quickly jumped to judgment about Eram and I, because both Eram and I do not practice the Arab-style hijab or the Arabized hijab, as I often call it. So let me share the comment that they made first, so you can get a sense of how this violence reaches us, kind of the harshness of the words, how they're crafted, and how this harshness is then hidden under a religious garb. So some Arabic term is used to justify the persecutory tone of the message, to almost try to sanitize it and make it look Islamic, almost as if somebody is doing the work of deen that they are trying to protect the religion of Islam and the purity of the religion of Islam. So let me share that with you first. So this is the comment that was made, and it was made in Urdu. I've done a translation, and the comment was, "You decrepit old women, you decrepit old women, revealing your hair while you talk about Islam. Ma'azallah." Now, ma'azallah basically means God forbid, or may Allah protect me, may Allah protect me from this fitna or this evil, and that's how the phrase is often used. But look at just how sexist and ageist and misogynist this comment is. And originally, I thought that it was a young Muslim man. Often these comments come from young Muslim men. We do apologies, but it's Muslim men who are in their late teens, 20s, and 30s who seem to have been particularly impacted by toxic masculinity who tend to make these comments. But sometimes the harshest comments actually come from Muslim women. And this comment, I've now found out, has actually come from a young Muslim woman, which is even more worrying because I was not expecting that. Anyway, so that got me thinking about the vitriol, the toxicity that is mentioned in this comment. It then so happened that a couple of days later, and perhaps this is why it was sitting on my chest. A couple of days later, I got another comment, and that was in response to an analysis I had done about this post that had been sent around by somebody on Facebook, and it had a list of 10 things which are haram, clearly haram for Muslim women. And I was analyzing that list of haram for Muslim women, and I'd made a comment and I'd said that these are the problems with this list. And I then had a response from a young man. I assumed it was a young man when I looked at his profile, it was a young man. But the comment was really vitriolic again and very insulting. Okay. And this time it was insulting towards my father. So let me share that with you as well, because I think it's important for you to see just how harsh these things are. And I'll come to the other bits on this slide later, but just note the first comment, which uses my name. So it says, Sitara Akram says the daughter of the youth father, LMFAO. I'm not going to spell out what that means. Go and read basic hadith. There the term the youth is mentioned. Your father will never enter paradise because of you. It's in the hadith. I'm not making it up. So I then went to this young person's profile, and I thought I will have a look at who's made that comment. And turns out this young person is a mere sapling. So he's about 17. He's younger than my sons. And he's not even old enough to have a proper beard. It seems that he's only recently sprouted from the ground, not quite tall enough to even be a fully grown plant or a tree. And yet he feels entitled, this young teenager, to speak to another Muslim woman like that. And so I was really taken aback. And when I went to his profile, I found that his profile was full of material from the Muslim manosphere, which is very toxic. So some really derogatory things about Muslim women, red flags about Muslim women that you should not marry. Here are the 10 red flags. The fatwa legal opinions from sheikhs who are often misogynists and women haters, but also have a bizarre kind of fetishizing attitude towards women. So on one hand, they say really negative, infantilizing, derogatory things about women. On the other hand, they want to marry 4 of them. And they're really obsessed with women's bodies and their hair and our eyebrows and our chests. So there's a fetishizing obsession that these men have. And often it's male ulama. Generally, it's male ulama who do that. And so I found those posts on his timeline on Facebook, on his profile. And worryingly, there was one where he was saying that the moment I marry my wife, and then he had shown photographs of from Afghanistan where women are dressed in these shuttlecock burqas, covered from top to bottom. And so he was then showing his intention that according to him, this is where the real Islam is, so to speak. And he said that after I marry, I'm going to move there. So he's going to take his wife to Afghanistan and live under the Taliban. So here is the Talibanization of a young person happening, which I found really worrying, because actually Muslim parents are now dealing with such a massive challenge that their daughters and sons are being exposed to this toxic masculinity, and where all kind of good cultural values have fallen away. The religiosity, as our overt religiosity has gone up, our hateful attitude and judgmental attitude and ugliness in our behavior generally has gone up. So you find these people who jump onto your timeline or your social media and they say really, really awful things. And whilst I was reflecting on that, and that was sitting on my chest, I then found out that in Pakistan, a young woman had recently been shot dead by her ex-husband because she took divorce from him. And I'm sorry these things will be triggering for you because many of us have gone through these experiences on social media, or we've heard about women, even amongst our close social circles, who've gone through domestic violence and other forms of violence. Now, I'm not talking about physical violence today per se, that's not the topic of conversation. But even in terms of verbal violence that happens in these social media spaces, it is hugely toxic. And the kind of words that are used against women and about women are just awful. And it's very clear that none of these people have ever read the Quran or opened the Quran in their lives. So they don't know what code of conduct is demanded by Allah. And also, they have not paid any attention to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's ethical conduct. Because actually, if they had, and if they had seen his noble example, they wouldn't be behaving like that. And for those of you who've been around on my channel a while, you will find a video on my channel where I talk about the reaction to the first podcast I did with Eram, where I was asked that explicit question about whether the hijab is obligatory or not, and I had said that it was not. I then had about 400 comments on Eram's Facebook page, and all those comments were really negative. And the most amount of vitriolic hatred was actually shown by Muslim women. So this violence is very common. And whilst normally I'm not affected by it, I've got very strong defenses. I don't pay much attention to other people's opinions of me anyway. But then sometimes things happen in quick succession, and also because this is almost the end of the year and I'm running on fumes and work is very busy, energy levels are a bit low. I was really impacted by these comments, and I was really and I got very worried about how young people are being affected by it. So that got me thinking, okay, this is a bit of a despairing situation, and I must admit I did feel quite, I'm normally a very optimistic person, but there was a sense of hopelessness and a sense of this is an insurmountable difficulty. Because if this is what our future generations are like, my God, what chances do we have of ever seeing beauty and harmony and values of justice and compassion return to our communities, to our lived practices, to our interactions? Because if this is what the next generation is like, it's really worrying. Then I also reminded myself that actually there is a bit of an echo chamber on social media, and certainly in the Muslim manosphere, things are very toxic and they are impacting our particularly young boys. There have been influences, of course, from really toxic podcasting brothers and, Andrew Tate and other characters who objectify and sexualize women. They can only think about women as sexual beings and sexually tempting beings. They're unable to think about women as noble beings with noble characters and their own humanity. So women are always objects to them, something to utilize for their own pleasure and for their own ends. And this is an incredibly toxic form of masculinity now that's taking hold. What happens in particular for Muslim women like me who talk about these things is that because I don't wear the hijab, that immediately gives an opening to people to just jump in. And women jump in because, of course, women who have internalized misogyny or women who are under the yoke of patriarchy think that by proxy they can gain some power. So they can behave like the toxic men, behave like the patriarchs, and then they can have some power and feel self-righteous. So they want to judge. And really, the definition of taqwa has now been reduced to kick somebody and kick someone very hard in the name of Islam. And this is taqwa. So unfortunately, that's where things are. And my reaction is quite visceral, and I felt quite angry and deflated because of that. So that got me thinking. And as a result of the thinking, here we are with this particular video. So what are the strategies that I use? As I said, these are my top tips. I use them. I find them helpful. But for those of you who have been exposed to vitriolic nonsense like this, I think these strategies will come in handy. Let me share those with you. But before I do that, I want to share an example with you of how our ulama are squarely responsible for this demeaning and diminishing of Muslim women in recent times. And I don't usually name names, but there are certain ulama, certain sheikhs who are at the forefront of this. They are actively training our boys to fail in their relationships because they're training those boys to use women as commodities and nothing else. So I'll give you an example from the timeline of the same young man who made that comment about my father ending up in hell. So let me share that with you. Okay, you should be able to see this particular screen grab, which is a bit of a montage. I've put some things together for you. So the first one is the comment on the left that this young man made to me that I'm the daughter of so and so and that my father will never enter paradise. So, playing God, he's decided that my father will not enter paradise and it's because of me. So my father will carry the burden of my sins, completely against the Quranic principle, of course, that every soul shall bear the burden of its own deeds. Then on his profile, he had shared something from another boy, and look at the comment below. It says, "Your boys, when a woman truly loves you, she will fix her attitude, her tone, her habits. Anything that risks losing you, don't settle for less." Now, this is the kind of attitude which is being taught to Muslim men, Muslim boys, both in the Muslim manosphere, but also in the non-Muslim secular manosphere where these conversations are happening about women. Remember, there is a rise in misogyny and hatred of women across the world, and there is a rise in violence against women across the world. But I want to link this with a fatwa from a very famous sheikh. He's got so many followers on Facebook. He charges money for giving fatwas. It's a business for him. And he also says some of the most stupid things that I have come across in terms of religious rulings. So I've copied one of them. And I'm going to share this as an example because you can see how this impacts both men and women, but particularly men like this young boy, because they're given a particular impression of women and they're told that women have no humanity. Okay, they're not fully human. So let me read this out. This is Sheikh Asim Al Hakim. Okay, I normally don't name sheikhs, but it's important that people know who these characters are. So somebody asks him a question. Every day when my husband returns from the office, his mother, his wife, and his daughter stand. He first hugs his mother warmly and loves her, then calls her daughter. He only says salam to me and goes upstairs. I wish he would meet me lovingly too, but in our culture it feels awkward. What is the Islamic guidance? Please advise how I should address this matter kindly and wisely. Now, this is a question clearly from a woman, and she feels that she is number 3 in the hierarchy of affection that her husband exhibits quite openly. And she's troubled by that. Now, as a woman, I can understand that, and my female listeners would be able to understand that, and empathetic men who see women as human beings with feelings, with valid feelings, would also understand that. But see how the sheikh responds to this. He says, "This is quite childish of you. Ask yourself these questions. Do you doubt that he loves you? Isn't there a possibility that his mother might feel a bit jealous of you? And this is why he is trying to avoid Satan from coming in the house, as it seems he is already in the house." Now, this is a very passive aggressive statement towards this woman. And this sheikh is now insinuating that this woman has Satan in her heart, which is why she feels jealous of her husband's affections towards his mother. So he's calling her Satan. See how immediately women are linked to the devil. Women are linked to evil and temptation and the source of discord in houses. This is how subtle this is. He then says, "A wise wife makes the life of her husband filled with peace and comfort, like Mother Khadija did with our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What are you trying to do to him? Give him a heart attack." Now you can see that I've linked that to the comment that I read out to you a moment ago, where this young boy has now got his expectations set, where he's saying, I'm not saying that this sheikh's fatwa is his source, but this young boy is going to be coming up against these fatwas, hundreds of them every day, because this is what our sheikhs are saying. This is a qualified mufti. Look at the level of his thinking. Look at the rot that sits in his mind. Our brains have collectively become putrefied and they stink of gangrene. That is how bad the intellectual rot is at the moment in the Muslim fatwa and Islamic law space. So a popular space, not the academic space. So now let's link that back to that young boy's statement. When a woman truly loves you, she'll fix her attitude, she will fix her tone, she will fix her habits. Anything that risks losing you, don't settle for less. So the point that is being made here by the sheikh is, you are Satan And if you were a good wife, you will adjust your expectations rather than expecting your husband to adjust his expectations and his behavior and conduct towards you. And this is the kind of thing that people are being exposed to. And because these sheikhs are making this level of derogatory, dehumanizing discourse about Muslim women normalized, they are normalizing hatred of Muslim women. They are normalizing objectification of Muslim women. They're normalizing the fact that women should have no feelings if they're good Muslims. And if they have feelings, they have poor experiences in their marriage, then by definition, they're bad Muslim women. Because if they were faithful women, they would not complain. And this is what's setting expectations. And this is then what reaches women like me, because all of these shuyukh are going around and they're making this irrational, baseless argument that a woman who shows her hair is naked. Nobody, I think, in the entirety of human history would have heard an argument as nonsensical as that. All human beings understand what nakedness is or what nudity implies. Nobody can argue that if a woman's hair shows or if her ears show, then she's actually naked or she's committed some kind of act of public indecency, for God's sake. You know, what has she done? Has she committed zina in public? But this is how these sheikhs and their students and their admirers will portray this stuff. This is how young women are now attacking other Muslim women using the same kind of arguments, just as young men are attacking Muslim women for their appearance, because they have made this silly argument, an absolutely baseless, irrational argument, whereby they have equated a strand of hair showing on a Muslim woman's head as being naked. The fact that we collectively have accepted this argument says something about the collective decline in our intellectual capacity, in our ability to think for ourselves. It's almost as if this fever, this illness has gripped us, and we've developed this collective pathology, this illness around the idea of Muslim women's appearance. And so all we get is vitriol, hatred, toxicity. Nobody is willing to listen to Muslim women who want to ask educated questions, who want to share knowledge. And I think I've been strongly worded in this video, but I have reasons to be strongly worded in this video. And this is actually a very benign kind of fatwa I've shown you. There are examples of fatwas which shock you to the core about how these men, these so-called men of knowledge, treat Muslim women and how they laugh about marrying multiple women. I have come across things from these some so-called, this is a genuine sheikh, but some so-called sheikhs who are endorsing these Sharia compliant versions of polygamous marriages and giving false information to convert Muslim women. And it's almost like kind of this polygamous meat market that they have created online. And nobody is critiquing and holding these men to account who are going around saying to Muslim women settled in the West, do not register your marriage with the civil authority in your country, the local council or registry office, because you don't need to. Your marriage is Sharia compliant once you've done this verbally. Why are they doing that? Because they make sure that Muslim women have no civil rights. They have no recourse in matters of divorce. They cannot take their husbands to court because their marriage was never registered in the first place. So I want to flag these things in strongly worded terms because I know how much harm, real harm, this is doing to Muslim women, and how Muslim women themselves, women like me who are raising young boys and girls need to be so mindful of how this is impacting their minds, their ways of thinking. It is really corrupting their souls. So it's an awful environment and challenge that we're dealing with. And inshallah, in another video, which will come out soon, I will also share with you the vocabulary of violence, especially this cognitive violence, where violence and ugliness enters our minds and then it starts showing up in our language. And there are signs of that. And I would share some of that with you because all of us worry about our children falling into this trap of this toxic masculinity and this demeaning, diminishing Islam towards Muslim women, the version that these so-called sheikhs and shuyukhs and men of knowledge have created. So inshallah, next time I'll share that with you. So how do we cope with that? How do we cope with this constant pressure, this onslaught, this judgment, and the constant slander that comes our way? And even though Allah forbids slandering Muslim women in the Quran, He's very clear about that. In fact, He even gives corporal punishment for that, and those punishments were meted out at the time of the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet. Somehow, people today, Muslims today, have forgotten the fact that slandering somebody of good character is a punishable crime. But because there are no consequences, we get away with it every time. We end up facing that slander, and we end up having our character muddied very easily and sullied very easily. So I'm going to share with you now with my strategies of coping with that. So let me bring those up on the screen for you. Okay, let's share that. So you should now be able to see a set of boxes in green and blue where I have shared my top tips. The first one, and this is what I turn to first, is to hold fast to the rope of Allah. Now, this top tip comes from a Quranic verse where Allah Ta'ala says, hold fast to the rope of Allah and do not cause division or tafarruqa amongst yourself. Now, people often translate the word division or tafarruqa as sectarianism, because sectarianism, of course, is based on a philosophy of hatred, and sectarianism always leads to hatred and divisiveness in the community. But tafarruqa is, we can think of it as generally hateful, divisive behavior as well. And this is what we're seeing online, is this generally hateful, divisive behavior. But when we hold fast to the rope of Allah, it means that we're holding fast to the teachings that He has given us in the Quran, and always reminding ourselves that this is the truth. This is the revelation. This is the wahi. These are the words of God. They have come to me. And what do I find in those words of God? I find in those words of God that He has created me equal. I find that He has given me intellectual capacity and legal capacity and agency, just as He's given to men. I find that He says, He makes it incumbent on humankind. He says that clearly to all human beings, O humankind, revere the wombs. And so women, the carriers of the wombs, in whose bodies those wombs reside, they are to be revered. They are to be respected. They're not to be sullied. So anyone who sullies a Muslim woman's character without any evidence of any kind, or who lashes out like that, is immediately contradicting the Quran and stands guilty and accountable in the court of Allah in the hereafter. They have no idea what's coming their way on the day of judgment, because they are going to be, they would need to seek forgiveness from the women they've harmed. And I tell you, nobody's going to forgive them. I find in the Quran that Allah has set equal accountability for me and for Muslim men and believing women. In Surah Al-Ahzab, in verse 35, so chapter 33, verse 35, that principle has been outlined in full detail. I know for a fact that the Quran has given me the same spiritual capacity as it has given men, that it has sent revelation to Muslim women, to believing women as well. We find the example of Maryam alayhi salam. We find the example of Musa alayhi salam's mother. So these are women who receive direct communication from Allah. And I remind myself of a point that Asma Lamrabat makes in her book about women reading the Quran. And she says that spirituality has no gender. Spirituality is not dependent on our gender, whether we're born male or female. What matters to Allah is our connection with Him, is our awareness of Him, which should guide our conduct. So this is the rope that I hold fast to, and I turn to the Quran for solace every time. The second one is radical acceptance. Now, that means accepting reality as it is and withholding judgment. So, in the case of this young man who's been corrupted by the teachings of these shuyukh, these sheikhs, these ulama, or other toxic male presence in the Muslim manosphere, I pray that Allah helps heal their soul, because their souls have become fractured and corrupted. They have become quite horrible human beings. And I accept that that's the reality I'm dealing with as well. And I need to look beyond the immediacy of the hatefulness of those comments and see who's sitting behind it. And it seems to me that a lot of young people are now growing up in environments, and perhaps a lot of older people as well, are exposed to these environments where all they're seeing around them is ugliness and violence. And so they have become accepting of it, which then means that the kind of work that I'm doing and other Muslim women are doing and other Muslim men are doing becomes even more important, not less important. So it reinforces my motivation to continue that work. Another thing I do is that I dip into my authentic self. I dip into my cultural capital. My cultural capital and my ethical capital will always guide my way because it aligns with the Quran. I have been taught not to slander other people and to make ethical decisions. And I come from a society in Pakistan where we grew up when we were growing up, we were soaking all the beautiful philosophy and poetry of the great poet philosopher Allama Muhammad Iqbal. And there is a very beautiful verse from him, a short kind of poetic verse, and he says, "Mujhe hai hukme azan, la ilaha illallah." What he means is, I am commanded to call people to faith, and there is no God but the one God. And so we're all commanded in our capacity to understand faith for ourselves and to invite people to it. And my interpretation of that faith will always prioritize God's mercy and the imperative that he's created for us, the accountability that he's created for us, that we must be just, we must be compassionate, we must be fair in our dealing with other people, we must keep our pledges, we must be truthful. And so Iqbal's poetry reminds me of what my role is. And my role is to talk to people about what I have understood in terms of what will take us to salvation, inshallah, to falah in the hereafter. And that is tazkiyah. The Quran says that again and again. It is your inner spiritual purification that will take you to heaven. And by dipping into my cultural capital, my roots, my language, my clothing, how I dress, my authentic self, I bring strength back into my soul, and I can keep carrying on with the work that I do. Another thing that I have become increasingly mindful of as I've got older, and it might be that this process is also happening for you. I think these things happen with us at different points in our lives. And if you were a young person who could practice active gratitude, then I would say, mashallah, you're brilliant. I've also practiced active gratitude most of my life, but I'm beginning to understand its philosophy better now that I'm older. And I'm very grateful for the privilege and the blessing that Allah has given me. I have this platform. I don't have to go out and be hateful towards other people. I can use this platform to gather people together, to have people walk with me on a journey, and to share with them a message which is based in justice and mercy and compassion. A message which tries to highlight the beauty of the teachings of Islam, its balance and its harmony. And I'm very grateful that I have had the opportunity to do the learning, to have access to libraries, to universities, and even a supportive environment at home where I can do this work. So I do actively practice gratitude. And actually, that is one of the quickest ways of kind of resuming my emotional equilibrium when something like this happens. And then finally, allyship. And my thanks to you. Because in the last 2 years since I've started this work and taken my learning out to the public, I have found such incredible allyship from you all, from Muslim men and Muslim women who have joined my channel, who have sent me thousands and thousands of brilliant, encouraging comments. And through those comments, they have also told me why that work matters to them. And so it gives me a lot of comfort knowing that through this work, I'm doing some public service, that perhaps I'm adding some good to the world. And if the Muslim world and the community has been gripped by this pathology, this judginess, as Generation Z would say, and we've started to accept ugly discourses and violent discourses about Muslim women, through your allyship, you're giving me the courage and the energy to take beautiful discourses and beautiful words and beautiful thoughts out, send that positive energy out. And I would hope that that would make a small amount of difference, because I come from a very humble position on that. I'm not here to change the world. I'm here to make a small contribution. So your allyship is absolutely one of the things that keeps me going. And I wanted to thank you for that. And before I finish, I want to share with you a couple of examples of those allyship, because actually, whilst those really awful comments were coming my way and I was thinking about them, what also happened, and for this I'm very grateful to Allah, is that I received 2 absolutely wonderful comments on my channel. So I'm going to share those with you, and I will tell you why that matters to me so much. So I've copied those comments across from my YouTube channel, and I have put a little envelope there with love hearts coming out to say thank you for your lovely messages. That's my way of thanking you. So 2 days ago, I got a message from someone saying, my entire life, I have been told about strict religious rules and why they should be followed without question. When I question them or ask, why is this? I am treated as if I'm the devil itself. And this has always bothered me deeply. Your research is a huge change for me. I feel like I can finally breathe. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. Love from Turkey. And you know, this sentence that I can finally breathe, I have had hundreds of comments from Muslim women saying the same thing. Because every time we experience verbal violence in online spaces or physical violence or aggression, even when that aggression is verbal, it's through the written word, it knocks the breath out of our lungs. And we have to flail around a little bit and sit down and get the oxygen back into our body. And we are given an understanding of Islam, which in itself is suffocating and ugly. As I've mentioned before, Professor Khalid Abul Fadl, in his book Speaking in God's Name, talks about those authoritarian discourses and how demeaning they are to Muslim women. And so this kind of phenomenology, this lived experience of not being able to breathe is so common amongst us all. And I think that commonality is being put into words, and more women are coming forward and sharing with me just how much better they feel, and they feel that they can breathe because they're coming across a different understanding of Islam, and one which is grounded in the sources of our faith, in the Quran, in the Sunnah, and in the Hadith, and in our classical law. I work within the tradition, not outside it. And then the second one, and I know Angel 7207, you're very much an angel. And I know that every few days you leave a lovely comment for me, and that spurs me on to make another video. So thank you for doing that. So I got this comment from Angel 7207 3 days ago saying, every few days I come back to visit your channel, especially after the amount of objectification I see online towards women, and how the hijab, even if used for whatever the society ruled to be as pious, is still a weapon in the eyes of most men, and a knife that they will willingly use against any non-hijabi woman, regardless of her research, intellect, and more aspects of her that go unnoticed due to her hair. I wonder when Islam became like that. Even if non-hijabi women were the worst people on earth in their point of view, the Prophet would have never treated them in such a derogatory way as we see nowadays. Thank you for this channel, Doctor. It's genuinely a place of solace for many of us. Many hearts my heart calms down here as if this was my home. Keep going as long as God gives you the strength, and share your beautiful thoughts with bravery. So I want to finish on this and just say thank you so much for being part of this journey, for continuing to encourage me. Your words also give me a lot of solace, and they fill up my reservoir of resilience. You know, my resilience goes back up again. And then I find myself energized once again to do this work. So it's really lovely, kind of my mission-driven sense of purpose in life is aligning so well with what I have now started to realize is how I'm being of service to people, and how I'm bringing them solace and comfort by always being grounded in religion, by always being grounded in the beautiful teachings of our faith. So I hope that this video has been something that has prompted some reflection. I know I've used some strong words here, not my usual style, but I wanted to document here and record how I feel and how other Muslim women feel when they come across these demeaning and diminishing discourses about them from well-renowned, globally influential ulama and shuyukh who are going around corrupting young people's minds because of the way they talk about women. And I've shared with you my top tips for dealing with this stress and this anxiety and this kind of heaviness that can sometimes descend on us, and it does descend on me. You know, I'm not immune to any of these things, but every time I feel that once I have had a few comments from trolls like this on social media, actually I can use those comments to build further analysis and further strengthen the argument that I'm making on my channel and the approach that I'm making on my channel. And hopefully this video will also bring home why that approach is so needed in our times. This is my small contribution to adding beauty to the Muslim world and to challenge the ugliness that seems to have taken us over like a fever, like an illness. Thank you very much for being part of this journey, for your encouragement, for your lovely words. I hope that this video is of benefit, and I hope that this video has been a bit therapeutic and cathartic it's certainly been a bit therapeutic for me to say these things. Inshallah, loads coming your way soon. So I will be recording an English version, a version in English of my talk with Eram around religious OCD, not as a podcast between me and Eram, but just as a video, like a short little lecture or conversation that I will do. So that will be coming out in English soon. Also, my son is going to be free from university. So when I say free, he's going into the winter break. So I have said to him that we need to have some really good conversations, again, about young Muslim men's experience of Islam, and particularly the brilliant insights he brings into how morality and discussions around morality are shaping across the world globally, but also the crisis of morality that we see amongst within Muslim communities as well. And what that means, the crisis of ethics and the crisis of morality and our inability to engage in dialogue and to become hateful and judgmental. So his perspective is important because he's a young man himself. So he sees these things from a different perspective than mine. I can't embody his perspective. Mine is my own, his is his own. And in the past, when we did a video with him, it was very well liked by a wide audience, and inshallah, we will be having some discussions, and we will be talking about toxic masculinity as well as part of that, and pick apart some of the mechanisms around that. So inshallah, watch the space, more coming your way, and starting with my recording of the religious OCD episode in English, inshallah, for my English speaking audience. Take care. Thank you for listening, and I will be back soon with you. Assalamu alaikum.